Hello and welcome to the show. Now, a while ago I did a race car showdown where I took a bunch of racing vehicles, all from different classes and different eras, and raced them around the Hockenheim circuit to see how the lap times compared to one another. Not just who was fastest, but to see what sort of the differences were in lap times between the vehicles. And, well, since then, Forza has had a fair few DLCs bringing all sorts of interesting, classic, iconic racing machinery that I was interested to see how that would fare. Things like this Porsche are now in the game. So yeah, I wanted to see how they would fare amongst the racing hierarchy. Of the vehicles today, 10th place went to the Porsche 911 GT1, a lap time 141.6. This is, to me at least, this is kind of the... If someone says GT1 cars, these are the cars that I think of. And it's a little bit of a shame that we don't have more of them. Things like the Mercedes CLK, the Nissan R390. We have the road-going version of the cars, which is great. I mean, I love the road-going things, are crazy homologated specials. But it's, yeah, kind of a little bit of a shame that we don't have more of the actual racing vehicle. So I was glad to see this 911 make it in as the racing version of the car. It is, however, the slowest vehicle that I tested for this session, and it's perhaps not too surprising. It has got the lowest PI of all of these cars in R class, whereas the rest of the stuff is in P and above. The Porsche struggles a little bit with straight line speed. It's the least powerful car that we have here with 550 horsepower. There's still plenty of power. Not very often you say that is the least powerful car, but it is the least powerful vehicle. 468 foot-pounds of torque, weighs just a little bit over 2,000 pounds. It's a good car to drive. Don't get me wrong, it's a nice, easy car on the most part to get the hang of, to drive it pretty quickly. It's a relatively easy car to get around a circuit. It does struggle a bit with straight line speed. It is quite a number of miles an hour down on just about 20 miles an hour slower than everything, going up to 40, 50 miles an hour slower than some cars down the main straight. It just struggles a little bit with that acceleration. Great through the corners, fantastic car through these turns, but does struggle with straight line speed. It is a fairly large jump in lap time to the Corvette Daytona prototype, a 134.968 with the Corvette. Now, I don't really know a huge amount about these Daytona prototypes. They're, I believe, from a bit of reading on the internet, they're pretty much specific to, is it the Rolex Endurance Series, or is it an American Endurance Series? They race at the Daytona 24 Hours. I'm guessing that's where they get the name for them. Yeah, they're endurance cars, but they are rather specialised to one specific series. I don't quite know where they would fit in amongst sort of the GT cars and so on. But yeah, it was good to see these. There's the Ford version as well in Forza. It's good to see more different categories of race vehicles in here. This was another pretty damn easy to drive car, I have to say. Provided you don't do anything stupid, you can get it sliding around if you're, a moron with the throttle, especially bouncing it across the curbs. The curbs at Hockenheim are vicious buggers. They're really nasty curbings around here, and I did get the Corvette sliding a little bit across them, but on the most part, it was another relatively easy to drive fast race car. 580 horsepower, 460 foot-pounds of torque, a little bit more power, slightly less torque than the Porsche. It is the heaviest of the cars here today, 2,300 pounds. It doesn't feel it, though. Admittedly, 2,300 is still very, very light, but, it's a good few hundred pounds heavier than the rest of the vehicles, as I get a bit of a slide coming out of the turn 2. Faster in a straight line than the Porsche, about 20 miles an hour quicker than that 911. Interestingly, the Corvette does, though, get beaten by the Capo T1, a 134.1. It's almost a second quicker than the Daytona prototype. This is a road car. Remember, the Capo T1, all of the vehicles here are completely standard, which means the Capo is on road tyres. Road tyres, and it is quicker than the Corvette Daytona. This thing is so absurdly quick, the T1. I could have put I thought about putting the 1.1 around here, but the Capo is just so much faster around a circuit than anything else. The Capo is ridiculous. It's got almost as much power as the Corvette, 575. Hasn't got quite as much torque, 310. But it weighs under 1,500 pounds. It's almost 1,000 pounds lighter than the Daytona prototype, and that is where this thing gets its speed from. It is so light. It is so incredibly fast through the corners, incredibly quick, accelerating. It is not easy to drive. However, the Corvette and the 911 were both very, very nice cars. Very easy cars to drive quickly, easy to drive consistently. The Caparo is not. The Caparo is an absolute twitchy bugger to drive this thing. There is so much front-end grip and not quite enough rear-end grip to go with it. Very, very easy to spin. You saw on this lap I played it risky around the first corner with a wheel on the curb. That's, yeah, not really ideal with this car, especially at a couple of the faster corners as well. You turn in a little bit too vigorously and you will spin the T1. A tough car to master, but when you get it right, this thing is an absolute monster. Up into 7th place now with the Nissan GTR LM, 132.8, just over a second faster than that Caparo. Is a full-on sort of LMP prototype car. The Nissan, though, is a strange one. This, a 768 horsepower, almost 900 foot-pounds of torque, with all of the power going through the front wheels. Now, to me, that is a very odd design decision to go for that one. Yes, they have got the kind of engine and batteries are all at the front of the vehicle, so it's got as much weight over the front. It's got huge front tyres. I actually did a little bit of research on this car. It's got, I think it's 355 or 365s on the front. That's giant tyres. It's got tiny wheels on the back. But trying to put that much power through the front wheels does seem like an odd decision. Amazingly, it isn't that bad. It really isn't that bad to drive. I expected it to be horrendous. It does do pretty well. You don't notice particular understeer going around the fast corners. You do notice coming out of the slow corners as you try to put the power down. This thing gets so much more wheel spin than, as we see here, than the other kind of prototype cars that it would be racing up against. It spins the wheels. You've got to be a lot more careful. The long flowing corners, I thought this car would be horrendous at. It isn't. It's an incredible kind of engineering achievement that this thing actually works. It wasn't very successful. I think it ran in one race before they scrapped the program and it wasn't particularly competitive. And it is not a particularly quick time either for a modern LMP car. But the fact that all of this somehow magically works is quite impressive. You do have to be careful, though, with the vehicle. Up into 6th place, Porsche 962C, 131.4 from this car. To me, this is a very much, probably the most iconic of the race cars here. The Rotherham's Porsches. I love the look of this car, and it is a bonkersly fast car. Brutally quick accelerating this one. 720 horsepower in the Porsche, 590 foot-pounds of torque. I think it was hitting up well towards the 200 mile an hour mark as we come down this back straight. A phenomenally quick car in a straight line. It is one of the older vehicles here. It's an 80s race car. It is not as sophisticated as some of the other cars. It is a little bit more of a brute through the turns. We haven't got the twitchiness that you got from the Caparo in this. Not at all. This is just not quite as planted on the road. I mean, let's face it, that's not exactly surprising. It's not got anywhere near as sophisticated aerodynamics and so on. It was just a hugely powerful engine and incredibly slippery shell to try and make it go as fast as it could. And yeah, I mean, there is sort of a wing at the back, and the car wheels about, it moves around, it's quite a handful, it's quite a lively car, and I absolutely love it. It's such a fantastic vehicle to drive, this one. It's just that little bit more terrifying than your normal LMP cars and so on. It's, yeah, I really did quite like it. And I have fond memories of this car. I had a Scale Electrics version as a kid. I always have fond memories of that particular Porsche. Up into 5th, we have the, perhaps one of the big surprises of this lot, the Toyota TS040. Now, this did 130.5. It is not quite as fast as I was expecting. It is still a very quick car. However, the lap time was just not quite as quick as I was thinking it was going to be. This Toyota was a mighty successful car. I think it's 2014, this won just about everything except for Le Mans, which was unfortunate when it broke down leading the race. It was incredibly successful car, winning, I think it was the World Endurance Championships and many of the other endurance races. Very good car. But around here, something about it meant it just wasn't quite as quick. And this isn't the first time we've seen it. It's not that it was a bad car either, this one. It was a lovely car to drive. I thought it was relatively easy to drive quickly. It's four-wheel drive. You can boot it out of the turns. You can put the power down, no problem. It felt very good through the corners. but it's lap time struggle, and it's not the first time we've seen this. The Audi R18, when I did this challenge last time, the Audi R18 was a very, very similar story. Perhaps something about this car is not quite ideally suited to the Hockenheim circuit. That's about all I can come up with with this car, because yeah, perhaps something about this the car, or perhaps my driving style in this car didn't quite suit this track. I didn't think I was having issues. I didn't feel like I was struggling at all with the Toyota. I thought it was a really rather nice car to drive, but it did struggle. It got beaten by the Jaguar XJR9. It did a 130.0. It's a half a second quicker than the Toyota. This another one of the great iconic race cars. It's a fantastically strange looking car. This one of the very few vehicles you'll see that have the real wheels covered. It's I imagine quite interesting having to try and change the tyres on this. There is kind of a little gap that I think you can get sort of a wheel gun to the wheels. I imagine that must be a real bloody pain though to work with, unless there's a sort of panel that comes away. Either way, you're not going to be doing sort of F1 style quick changes on those rear tyres. Either way, it is a great car, this one. It is a hugely fast vehicle. Can change direction very, very well. You can carry lots and lots of corner speed. It is not the easiest car to drive. It's not bad. It's not difficult. It's not like, again, not like the Caparo. It's not a twitchy bugger. But when you're really pushing the vehicle, the back end just lets that go that little bit. It's kind of very much along the lines of the 962 in many ways. Kind of felt quite similar between the pair of them. The Jaguar is far faster of the two, but yeah, there were certainly some similarities. I had a problem with quite a few cars getting a sort of a wheel just slightly stuck on the grass, pushing my luck out of that final corner. You might have seen a few of the vehicles running out there. It was quite easy in some of these cars. Up into third place, we now have the Porsche 919, a 129.6, only 0.4 of a second down the road from that Jaguar. Bear in mind, this is the reigning Le Mans champion, the 919. Only 0.4 of a second quicker around Hockenheim than that Jaguar. Quite a lot of years separate these two cars as well. I think that's a testament to just how quick the Jaguar was. But getting on to the Porsche, this was a fantastic car. It really was a very, very good car. Now, I tend personally not to drive LMP cars, prototype cars. Generally, this sort of vehicle, I tend not to drive that much. I much prefer the touring cars and the lower class cars. I have a lot more fun racing those vehicles. It's fair for all of these cars because I'm equally inexperienced with all of them. This Porsche was by far one of the easiest cars I think I've ever had to drive that is this quick. It was just so easy to get it fast around this racetrack. It's another four-wheel drive car, most powerful car we have here today at 900 horsepower, 1,100 foot-pounds of torque, and it weighs less than 2,000 pounds. Lots of power, lots of torque from the engine in here, and four-wheel drive. You can boot it out of the turns. It's absolutely fine. I didn't actually realise it was four-wheel drive until kind of afterwards. It really doesn't feel like it through the turns. There is none of that four-wheel drive understeer that you can get from very high-powered four-wheel drive cars. It's not there at all. Absolutely none of it. It is a lovely car through the high-speed or the low-speed turns. Into second place, we go to the open-wheeled vehicles, the Chevrolet Lola T9000. Sounds a lot more like a Terminator than a race car, but there we go. Did a lap time 128.0, second and a half down the road from that Porsche. Now this, I wasn't quite sure what to expect from this car. It's certainly, you look at it, it's very, very skinny in terms of aero parts. It's a relatively older race car, at least. I thought it might be a little bit of a handful. Really wasn't the case. Really wasn't the case with this car at all. It drives almost identically to the modern Indy cars. Pretty much the same. Relatively easy to put the power down. Okay, you might have to be a little bit careful with it out of some of these turns, but yeah, for the most part you can jump on the throttle no problem. Good corner speed, you've just got to watch out for the understeer. Much like the modern Indy cars, there is a lot of understeer in this vehicle. The front end just doesn't quite get turned in through the corner. You saw on this lap, I turned in a little bit too soon to one of the fast corners. It will go through there sort of flat out, but you've got to be incredibly precise. Turned a little bit too soon, you sort of like to get across the grass. This was the other turn that caused huge issues coming up. If you don't get it spot on, you're just going to understeer wide. Now, that does actually make this a relatively easy car to kind of learn to drive quickly. It's kind of quite nice and safe almost, because you know exactly what the car's going to do. You know exactly what this vehicle is going to do when it comes up to a corner, which, yeah, makes it relatively nice and easy to learn to drive. But then we have our Victor, complete opposite to the Chevy, the McLaren MP4, a 122.6, this car. If you think other vehicles are fast, completely and utterly ignore them and go and drive this. This is speed on an entirely another level. The McLaren, it is just mind-bendingly fast, this car. 675 horsepower in this one, 312 foot-pounds of torque. It's only got 2 more torque than the Caparo. However, it weighs 1,190 pounds. It is absurdly light. And the front end gets change direction like absolutely nothing I have ever driven before. It will take incredible amounts of speed into these corners. Now, it does take some getting used to. This car, much like the Caparo, if you drive it too vigorously, this is the twitchiest car in the world. It is so easy, especially on cold tyres as well. So easy to bin the McLaren because the front end will get turned into corners at such great speeds and the back end can't quite follow. If you are too vigorous with the analog sticks as well, you're going to have a massive accident. Once you get the hang of it though, nothing is going to compare. I made the mistake of driving this car first. Out of all of the vehicles that went here, this was the first one that I drove, and everything feels so incredibly slow. Everything feels slow. Having driven this McLaren, that is how much speed that there is in this car. It is an incredible experience. Now, on to a table of the 2 episodes combined, and it is the McLaren that goes fastest. It's 122.6, is over a second and a half quicker than the Lotus E23, you know, a modern Formula 1 car. The Lotus does have more power, more torque, etc., but it is heavier, and the McLaren can get changed direction so well and is still monumentally fast, accelerating that, yeah, it is an absolute beast. In 4th, we find the Chevrolet Terminator with a 128.0. It's only 0.3 of a second down on the modern Indy car. I really thought it might struggle. I thought it could be quite a difficult car to drive. It's really not the case. Said between the pair of them, despite the older car having much less in the way of aero parts, it still drove very similarly to the Honda. The Mazda 787B is still the fastest non-open-wheeled vehicle, 0.3 of a second quicker than that Porsche 919. Mazda is seriously... Porsche is a good car. Mazda, though, is really rather fast here. The Jaguar XJR9 goes into 8th, a fraction down on the Peugeot 905, and the Toyota does get beaten by the Audi R18. Both of them very similar in lap time. Both of them suffered kind of similar fates, really, around this track, perhaps just not quite suiting those vehicles. Further down, and we find in 11th place the Porsche 962, a 131.4, beating the Nissan GTR LM that beats the Caparo T1 and the Corvette Daytona prototype. All cars from this episode. They beat the Lotus 77 classic Formula 1 car ahead of the McLaren Can-Am car. The LaFerrari does, by just a couple of tenths, beat the Porsche 911 GT1. The 911, though, does beat the Aston Martin DBR9, the poor Audi 90 at the bottom. That car does struggle a little bit with competing with this lot. Quite surprised to see the LaFerrari beating the Porsche, but I think the Porsche just struggled with straight line speed. It was great through the corners, but it did struggle with some of that straight line speed compared to, well, just about everything. And that Caparo, I think, as much as we know how fast the Caparo is, when you look at it compared to these sorts of vehicles, it's only, 12 seconds down on the McLaren. It's 10 seconds down on the modern Formula 1 car. And this is a road car. It's running on road tyres. I think is incredible. It's only, 1.3 seconds down on that Nissan GTR LM. The Caparo is just mind-bogglingly fast around just about everywhere to keep up with these full-on race cars. Now, I will like to point out at the end here that, yes, I have no doubt setups are going to make a fairly sizable difference with some of these vehicles, and that could perhaps go to explain some of the differences between the McLaren and the Lotus, different setups suiting different tracks, etc. the only way I can really do this as fairly as possible is to run all of the cars standard, because if I start tuning one and got to tune the others, and then have I tune them to a same sort of competitive level, etc., it's very hard to do that and keep it all balanced and measured. So this is the only way I can really do it as fair as possible, but there is still an element that some cars might be better suited to some tracks than others, etc. I can't really eliminate that as such, but yeah, I still prefer the McLaren to drive. I think it's a much nicer car. When you've got the hang of it, it is a really twitchy bugger when the tyres are cold and you're not quite prepared for the speed and the grip, but there really is nothing quite like that MP4. It is just an incredible vehicle. I highly recommend, if you haven't driven it before, if you haven't spent much time with it, go and have a go. It'll scare the crap out of you, but once you've got the hang of it, my God, is it a fast car. Anyway, that is it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.